how would you describe the origin story of your business? How does it connect to those themes of designing for belonging and turning cliffs into launch pads and caring for Black women?
So many things. It's like, where do I start? I think in grad school is where some of the seeds for business ownership were. I was working for a very grassroots, neighborhood-based nonprofit organization that had good intentions, but some structural realities that were impacting impact, right? And I remember
Mhm.
that it was an outreach arm that started from a faith community that was doing work in community to address some of the needs of neighbors around lack, gaps between what I have and what I need in order to thrive. And I
Yeah.
remember I was in grad, so I had to be like about 23 this time. And I remember that the board was predominantly white, mostly men. And the people that I was serving were all people of color and predominantly women of color. And I just remember thinking, if I want to change some systemic things, I need to sit there. Because I was doing more of like program manager, very entry level work. I did not have the power of the purse or the power of the policies. I didn't have the structural power to really dismantle some of the things that the people closest to the pain, or even to get them as an organization to realize that we need to put the people closest to the pain, closest to the power. And so
That's
some
right.
of this came through graduate school. I thought grad school was going to be the lever. If I get this extra degree, then I can apply to do this work here. But in the meantime, I'm living in the community. I'm experiencing these things. So at this time, I'm working for an organization. I have no health care. So this goes up until the time actually up until I got married. When I got married, I was 31. That was the first time between 25 and 31, I had no health care. So 31, where I was like, I actually have sustainable health care because I can get this through my husband's employment. So I was serving people while living with realities. I still qualify for free tax prep. And that's college
Yeah.
degree, right? All of these things we don't talk about, all of these intersections, right? And at the time, I was really trying to build relationships because I was a transplant. I didn't know. Growing up, I remember people telling me, like, go to school, get your degree, right? Get a good job, and then stay there. Stay there till
Yep.
you retire, which that just makes sense coming from what our parents came from, coming out of the automotive industry. In my family, a lot of people were somehow connected to automotive
Mine too, yeah.
victory, right? And so all of those different things. But I remember thinking, y'all, hard work ain't the only lever, and a degree is a lever, but it ain't the real lever. Like, I was living through relationships being the lever, being revolutionary, and that in business, it was the future of business was network to network. I didn't realize nobody had taught me that people do business with who they know and trust. And I'm sitting
Yes.
here, I'm working hard, I'm doing everything I was taught to do. I went to school, I'm doing this. I have all of these things that were taught to me, yet there felt like there was this skeleton key. And so I remember going to networking events, trying to find place, trying to find belonging, trying to build relationship. And Rolando, I would spend more time navigating, wondering if anybody was going to even acknowledge me.
Mhm.
But whatever I was supposed to glean from the event, or whatever the event depicted that they would offer. I was tired of going into spaces and being the only Black person or the only Black woman, or it's sprinkles. We can scan the room and identify all of us. And I just remember, like, what? Break into space that don't really feel like they want me here.
That's real.
I feel visibly invisible. And
That's real.
and that's really the space that the Rockstar Woman Movement came out of. I realized that some dreams come from inspiration, some things come from observation, some things come from agitation. This was born out of all three. It was that, why do I have to feel like I have to contort to be in spaces that don't see value in me? And
Yeah.
then this observation, like when I do go to these spaces, literally nobody was talking to me. Nobody acted like I had anything meaningful to contribute. And then I would look at all of the vendors. By this time, I did own a business. We had services. We were in the product space. And I'm like, how do you become that was one motivation. I want to join some supply chain. How do I get into the supply chain of some of these events? And even the ones built for women, all the vendors were white men. And I'm like, okay, make that make sense. And so there were all of these skeleton keys, and none of the things that I had been traditionally taught were the lever to access them.
Yeah, the why do I have to contort and be in these environments where as you're listening, one of the many things I was thinking is like the human equivalent of that interaction where you go into the store and the person begrudgingly slams the money down on the table instead of putting it in your hand. That sort of oh, okay, here. You know what I mean? A begrudging acceptance. So why should I have to contort myself for these environments that aren't designed for me? And so from those feelings then birth the Rockstar Woman movement.
It did. I remember sitting in a cafe and writing on the back of the napkin how I wanted to feel, because I'm a feeler. That is not a mistake. It's
Yeah.
not a liability. That is divine creation. I am a feeler. And when we think about belonging, when we think about emotional intelligence, feelings are a metric. Feelings are KPI, whether we like to admit it or not. And so because we all know when we belong and we all know when we don't. And a lot of
We
feelings
don't.
are one of those metrics. It's a metric. And so I started with, how do I want to feel? And I started writing that down. And then I was like, yo, I don't want any more boring swag. By this time, Deuce was 2, so I would get these little stress balls and all these little pom-poms, and I would put them in his toy box. And I'll never forget the day that he had put it back on my bed. I
He said, "I don't want this."
said, "Right, you can miss me with all your work toys." I'm like, boring, tacky swag. I want swag like at this time, I'm like America's Next Model. I'm like, I want Tyra Banks, New York Fashion Week. I want that kind of energy. I want new release Apple
Yeah.
swag. But above all, I wanted to be in an environment that wanted me and that saw value in me. And not just professionally, right? Because we all have felt that. But there's no honor for
Mm,
me as a human. I wanted to be
that's
in
right.
a space that allow for both to coexist. Because, like, at that time, I was navigating seasons of brilliance and brokenness in the same space. And one doesn't cancel out the other. On most days, most humans in some way are navigating some intersection of brilliance and brokenness.
Mhm.
Maybe not personally, but you have brokenness around what's going on with someone that you love, what's going on in the world around us, what's going on that's beyond your control. And so I wanted space for that. And so I left that event and I called 2 of my dear sister friends and I was like, this idea. No, actually, I called my husband first because I was like, yo, D, spend some in the budget for me to host a little event. I'm thinking 30 people. I'll serve them some soup and sandwiches. And he was like,
Okay.
right. He is all I'm thankful I have a life partner that is always invested in my big ideas, even if they didn't make sense to him. I know everybody doesn't have that, but I have to acknowledge
That's true.
his part and his love has been safe landing because he was the one with the stable job. Anybody that has loved an entrepreneur knows it
Yeah.
can be violent.
Yeah.
And so he the one that had the health insurance or the stable job or the solid retirement plan, and I would not have been
Yeah.
able to do some of the things that I have done that footing. But then I also called 2 sister friends and I was like, "Yo, I got this idea." And one of them was like, "Yeah, okay, I'll help you." And my other sister friend, which is what she was like, "Girl, that's a phenomenal idea, but I think you're thinking too small." So she was like, "I will help you do it, but we're not gonna do it at that little cafe that you were at. Let's look for a real venue to do this."
You know what though? There's power in that too. Power in the friend who can remind us in the ways that, "Oh, wow, I see you have something here." And you're thinking too small in love, right? But you're thinking too small. Like this is bigger than what even we might imagine in that moment. Wow, how powerful was that to hear that from your sister friend? We're not gonna do it there. We have and that was 6 years later. And now it has grown into
Mhm.
this movement that is impacting so many. We don't have to talk every day, but there are things that you put out into the world that I see and I follow and I track. And I remember you made this one post around just and I love your ability to self-reflect and then also not only to do the public thing, but then also to take folks on the journey of how you are building as you go to normalize that. And that's some of the messaging that I get from it, the power in doing that in public. And there was something that you wrote around, okay, this thing started with blog posts. And then from the blog post, it turned into, it grew into something else. And just how it started with a blog post, but then it expanded into something more. And so if you remember what I'm talking about, could you say a little bit about that? I don't know if you're the exact, because I know you write a lot of things, but I do remember it was like the trajectory. I just started this thing in a blog post, and then
Right.
I built some community. The blog post became a book. And I'm
Mhm,
recalling this from memory, but
mhm.
I just appreciated your storytelling even around that process.
No, I thank you for saying that because I think sometimes we overthink. We overthink, we think things have to be perfect, we think they have to be polished, and really, sh courage is just the willingness to act on your big idea. And we do that in increments. Sometimes we do that in leaps, all of that. But I started when I was on maternity leave, I started writing a blog about what was like, can we just talk about our success with yeah, can we just
Mhm.
talk about like this brilliance and brokenness space? Can we talk about it? And I only thought initially, I said, my husband and my mom have to read it because I'm postpartum. I just gave y'all this whole human. Y'all gonna read this. But then it grew. And I started to notice that in 1 year, I had 600 subscribers, and many of them were elected leaders or CEOs. And I realized that there was a gap that we were not talking to people who were high performers about wellness.
Mm,
We tend to believe that just because someone is high performing, high functioning, or they have some type of title, degree, mantle, role, responsibility, that means that they're okay. When in fact, they've just learned how to slay even when they're not okay. And that
mhm,
feel really called to are people who know how to slay when they're not okay. And so the Rockstar Woman Movement was just an extension of that. And we kept growing that. So that first year we were at City Flats Hotel, we sold out at 289 people. The next year was COVID. I thought, "Okay, surely this isn't gonna work." I remember we were about to mail invitations the day the governor declared sheltering in space, and one of my mentors said, "Girl, go online." And this is before Zoom, Teams, all of these
yeah.
thing. And so we pivoted and we grew to 389. Then the next year was like we were in and out of COVID. That was 21. We grew to 589. And then we've continued to grow. We've had 25 states and 3 countries. We've evolved into being more than just we've become a destination event. We are now tracking how we impact hospitality and tourism for West Michigan. We launched a membership community last year that's 10 months old. It'll turn a year in January. And so I love, I think culturally, as Black folks, we've always been taught don't despise small beginnings. I
Mm,
think we come from people that have always understood the benefit of using what you have where you are. We starting with what you have and where you are. And so I think that just feels culturally very natural because I didn't start with sponsors and dollars. I was paying friends in shirts, paying
yep.
friends in
Yeah.
lives.
That's right.
But I have always a friend of mine texted me today who I really respect and admire, and she is another Black woman that leads a social justice organization, and she was like, "I always have respected that you are not afraid to build what you dream. You're not afraid to try it. You're not afraid to bet on you." And I was like, "You're right, this I don't always get it right. Sometimes
Mhm.
this process has taught me a lot. There have been some painful learning moments, but I pray that is one of the things that I'm infusing into the legacy of this work that I wanna believe and bet on you
Yeah.
and bet on your big
Yeah.
ideas, even in
Yeah.
seed form, right? Because now you talked about it. There's been visibility to the work, there's been awards to the work, people see numbers, but that is not where this started. And I just think that one of the you've heard me say this in the album. I think one of the greatest travesties that we do is that we shelve our ideas or we incinerate our ideas versus incubate our
Yes.
ideas. And so my hope for
Yes.
every maker on the call is that you will incubate your ideas. You will not incinerate them. And probably one of the most tragic ways we incinerate our ideas is we just let them chill out on the shelf and we never activate them.
Yeah, we just let them chill out on the shelf. We never activate them. That's one of the most resounding, most powerful messages that I get from a lot of the work that you do. And I love that it is in different formats too. Your messaging, there's so many ways to access it, which for me reminds me that there are also so many ways. There's so many other ideas out there. There's so many ways to implement on what are ideas are. And I talked about this earlier, what your messaging around that our dreams are not just for us.
Mhm.
Some of what I've heard you share around finishers and difference makers, it allows for those times, those periods of pause and interruption. But it's just don't forget, don't give up on your dreams. And one of the things I really appreciate hearing from you, and I've heard on the album, but then also I've heard you say it in different spaces too. But this lesson that I'm sharing with the listeners too is it's a foundational thing. You're like, and I'm paraphrasing, but you're like, just look around you and all the physical objects in space. Okay, so I'm just saying this example. I'm holding my phone for folks who are listening, and if you're watching, you can see this. But the things that we can reach out and touch were the results of someone else's creativity. It started with an idea, and so why not us? It's an invitation. I just love that about you, and I love that about your work and the message that you share to folks. There really is room here. That's just one of the things I so much appreciate about your work and your messaging and how you move through the world.